Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you all. My name is Angela Carroll, and I'm the moderator for the Black Magic panel. Just to start off, this is not Black magic like Hollywood Black magic, right? Where we see Black cultural traditions and African traditions as wicked or evil. This is Black magic like Astro Black, right? Like this is Black magic like interstellar funk, right? Like this is Black magic like all of the magical things that Black folks do and that African culture does that have never been seen or recognized as beautiful or magical. So we are reclaiming those narratives, and that's why I'm so excited about the directors and the actors that are on this panel. Before I introduce everybody, I want to be sure to note that Black Femme Supremacy Film Festival is hosted on the unceded land of Piscataway, Lumbee, and Cherokee peoples. We organize on the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway people, now known as present-day Baltimore. We wish to pay respect to the elders, past and present citizens of the Setterville Band of the Piscataway Conoy, the Piscataway Indian Nation, and the Piscataway Conoy tribe. We strive to hold space and value the perspectives that these nations share regarding their histories, cultures, and traditions. As we build community with sovereign nations to ensure reconciliation on their rightful land, we encourage our attendees to learn more about the Piscataway by going to piscatawayindians.com. With that said, I want to take a minute or two to introduce our esteemed group of panelists. I'm so excited to be in conversation with these directors and actresses and that are just representing all of the awesome Black girl magic that we love and are here for. So representing the Lobbyists is Jackie Hiddock. Hiddock, have I pronounced your last name right correctly?
It's Hiddock. Yeah, you're doing great. Hiddock.
Excellent. Apologies. And the Lobbyist is directed by Thomas Pace, who is not here but is standing in solidarity with us. We also have representatives from the film B.G.K. We have Torres Thomas and Blayre Pichon. Excellent. We also have represented from the film, short film EQ. We have the amazing vocalist, performance artist, singer, songwriter, activist, all the things. Nia, with the film directed by Bashi Rose, who again is not here on the panel, but is here in solidarity virtually or in spirit with us. We also have representatives from the film The Kall. We have Barbara Mamabolo here with us as well. And for Pigment, we have representation. We have Miss Henrietta Biayemi on the call as well. Biayemi, thank you, Queen. For the film The Black Baptism, we have Stephanie Diane Ford on the call. And for the beautiful film, I'm sorry?
I was just saying hi. Happy
for Herald. Oh, excellent. And finally, last but not least, we have Herald of Blue, the really beautifully animated film by Jacqueline C.J. Barnes. Excellent. So to get started, and because we have so many folks on the call, we've done this in a bit of a kind of putting together of films, thinking about similar themes that are happening in the film. So The Kall, Pigment, and The Black Baptism all had themes that dealt a lot with Black women's agency and thinking about the ways in which Black women's bodies can be used as conduits or vessels, as it were, for greater supernatural lessons, right? For the protagonists involved, but for mankind in general. And so I want to start with The Kall, and which is kind of a very similar theme, but we very rarely think about, Duppy culture, Caribbean culture, or ghosts from a Black perspective. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what influenced create The Kall. and make sure that you take yourself off mute.
Thank you. So I have a family member that has been diagnosed with some mental illness, with psychosis. And that was a very devastating diagnosis, as you can imagine. And as a family, we've been living, with this for years. And my dad and our family there is from South Africa. And my parents went back to visit, and my aunt mentioned something about the ancestors not being happy about something, and this family member, his mental illness having to do with some of that. And this was a big shock to me. And I started doing research about traditional ancestral worship in South African culture. And I started to imagine, and I started to learn about sangomas, which are traditional healers. And the traditional healer is sort of born with these visions and these signs of psychosis. And I thought, well, what would happen if somebody in North American culture that's removed from this original traditional culture started experiencing these visions and didn't know what was happening to them? And so that was all the sort of impetus for the film. And then everything sort of came from there. And I imagine that this would sort of look like a, more of a horror film like we're used to. So I don't know if it makes sense or answers your question.
No, it definitely does. And
Okay.
I think that what I really appreciated about the film was the aesthetic, right? Like that there was a real appreciation, the lighting of Black film, the appreciation for melanin, the appreciation, again, covering a story about ghosts, or about the supernatural, or even about death, or like that death is not really death, from an African perspective. And can you talk a little bit more about, just what made you kind of want to pursue that, or those stories of death in general, from like a South African perspective in particular?
Well, like I said, it's my background in sort of learning more about it. And I feel sort of very removed from that culture because I grew up in Canada, in Toronto, without a very large South African community. So it's, as an adult, those are things that I've gone back and learned about my history that way. And I think it's a lot more liberating because, like I said, if in the role of the Sangoma in traditional culture is revered, that's a very important member of the community who speaks to the living on the dead's behalf. So I thought it was a really empowering way to view people with these gifts, as opposed to the way that in Western society people are treated, which is to be stigmatized and institutionalized, and etc. And in terms of when you were talking about the color in the film, that was very important to me, to make sure that the film wasn't in realism. I didn't want to say like this is reality, and I wanted to sort of say this is I wanted the film to feel very constructed, to say this is my vision of the world, rather than just like say this is Western culture, or this is traditional culture. I wanted to make it clear that this is it's an art film.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. It definitely is. I want to go to Henrietta now with Pigment. I think one thing that really moved me about Pigment was, again, this notion of a young girl having the agency to kind of change her reality and to protect her mother, right? To protect her family. Can you talk about what influenced that film, and what influenced her to have those particular powers and to use them in the way that she did?
Yeah, Pigment honestly came about as a standalone origin story for a superhero, honestly. I've always heard Black women are superheroes, and I didn't necessarily like that because it was something where sometimes we're forced to be superheroes. Sometimes it's not of our own power, but it's what's happening to us. And Pigment, Indira, the main character, is meant to understand the realities and harshness of her life, but also have this autonomy and power that she's able to make differences that I think a lot of us would wish or really would like to have in our lives. Sorry, I think you're muted.
That I am. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the aesthetic choices that you made? As far as I appreciated the moments that there were a lot of quiet moments where you were just seeing the protagonist drawing, or seeing the protagonist kind of dealing with the PTSD of being in an abusive home. Can you talk a little bit about why those aesthetic choices were important to you, and also why you chose to make the primary protagonist a teenager, right? Like a young person.
Yeah. Growing up, I've always been an introvert. I've always been someone really quiet. And I think that's something that just having that quietness was something that I had to live with, knowing that people may not understand me or know what I'm talking about or know my story, but also knowing that I'm not able to share it. And I really identify with this character because even though she's quiet, her power is it's powerful. And she says everything through her actions, through what she draws. And I really wanted to have that. Yes, there's music and there's ethereal sounds, but overall, it's a very quiet film and there's not a lot of dialogue at all. It's more about her reaction to the world. And so I use a lot of colors as well, mostly purple, and everything is a little oversaturated just to remind you that this is her world. And although you don't necessarily know everything that's going on, you're getting a glimpse of it.
Excellent. And I was like, what a cool power to have, right? like who doesn't want to like take people out just by drawing a picture, right? Like exactly. Who's gonna fuck with you then? Nobody. Okay. Now I'm gonna move to the Black Baptism crew. Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about, I think what's so cool about the film is that very rarely do we see, universal consciousness or God represented as a Black woman, right? And I appreciated that, but I also appreciated this kind of, afterlife, this kind of, way in which the protagonist is trying to figure out who they are and deal with the guilt of what they've done in an afterworld, right? Like what does an Indigenous or an African afterworld look like? And you created that in this really creepy, but very interesting way. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired the Black Baptism and why it was important for you to tell that kind of story?
Sure. So what inspired the story? There were a lot of ideas and themes that it came out of, but I wanted to explore the overall idea of finding the courage to face fear, because I think that has a lot to do with our plight and the situation that we're in as a group, of community, and individuals as a whole. So I wanted to put the character in an environment and situation where they either had to face what they were afraid of, or they were going to die. And those survival instincts kicked in, and she tapped into, she had to, the only solution was for her to connect with the universe, which was herself, her to realize that she is part of a greater power, a greater whole, scientifically on the atomic level. And that was the only way that she could mentally overcome all these visual things that were stimulating her. She wasn't sure if she was going to get out, just all the psychological tricks that they were using to keep her confined in that space. And so that's where the overall idea started. And then I tapped into our African traditional religions and themes. So the Oya story and mythology from Yoruba, the goddess herself represents the goddess Nut from the ancient Egyptian pantheon, which is the sky, the firmament. I symbolized her as the universe. And it's really just a kind of a very symbolic story of us being a microcosm of the macrocosm.
Excellent. I mean, I appreciate, yes, definitely.
Okay.
And I appreciated even just the kind of specificity of, you know, this notion of like the sword and the stone, but it was a machete instead, right? Like,
right.
Just, yeah, like I think that there's a way in which it becomes more accessible. And I was curious about the creatures as well. Like, there's a long history of like Black folklore and fables that reference kind of crows or ravens, right? As a kind of like, my grandmother would always talk about, you know, if you see a bunch of crows or ravens in front of someone's home, then that means someone recently has passed away in their family. And so there's a way in which birds, but particularly Black birds, are associated with the afterlife in a particular sort of way as well. So I appreciated the kind of the various mythologies that you were incorporating to create the film. I also really liked your. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying I also really enjoyed the scenes where you were in that other dimension, right? And I was curious about some of your technique in that. Did you shoot it on a green screen? I mean, were you in like a sound stage, or were you having to build these environments? Can you talk a little bit about your production?
Sure, absolutely. Well, to speak to the creatures for a bit, they were supposed to be eagles, and I'm glad that you thought they were creatures, because then I wasn't sure how they would come off or read on screen for some people. I wanted them to be like scary monster creatures for her to perceive them as that. But also if people saw them as being masks, that was fine. But they were inspired by kind of that astrology a little bit, the Scorpio symbolism, where you have different levels of each sign. So you have on the more mundane or physical level, you have the scorpion, and then it evolves into the eagle, and then its highest manifestation or expression is the phoenix, because she was going on this transformative level. So they were kind of like part of the symbolized the group that was watching her, and really their role was to help her kind of realize that she, you know, was the goddess of the universe. But when we got to those scenes, she was technically supposed to be in outer space, or basically just in that Black realm, the void of what we call space. And we shot that on the green screen in a small studio here in Durham, Shadowbox Studio. Shout out to Shadowbox. They hooked us up. Very small studio space. They had a green screen curtain. It was really, it was very kind of tough. It was my first time in my first film. So we lit it the best we could. It was a huge learning experience, you know, doing that. And I also had a neighbor of mine who was kind enough to help me kind of build the set so we could create that watery surface environment. So we just got, just long 2x4s. It ended up being like 10-foot by 6-foot triangle. And we put that up against the green screen with a black, it was like a black, you know, protective plastic, like you get it from Lowe's or the Home Depot for construction and building. And then covered that surface with water to protect the floor, and, you know, so it could get off that effect. And that's how we shot it. So we didn't get to shoot it in 360 degrees, but we had about 3 or 4 like good angles that we were able to use. So yeah, so that was tough. I wouldn't recommend anyone do that for their first film unless you have someone, you know, that's done it before. But it came off good enough. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, we love ambition, right? I mean, it's your first film, so why not, you know, try and go all out, right? Like, that's the time to experiment. I want to move on to the next kind of group of films that dealt with transformation and kind of revelation and transcendence through grief. And I think, you know, in this moment, you know, during the pandemic, but also for a long time, you know, for across the African diaspora, Black folks have been trying to figure out how to grieve and process, you know, consistent in the persistence of Black death and the persistence of not being treated as citizens in our respective countries for a very long time. but there's a way in which Black perseverance, always comes through, and Black joy always comes through. And I felt that a lot in both the films EQ and Herald of Blue, in which the protagonist had to deal with issues of disappointment, issues of death, right, of mourning, but ultimately were able to elevate, right, and in some regards levitate, right, evolve as a direct response to those tragedies. And so, if we can start with Herald of Blue, with Jacqueline, if you can talk a little bit about what inspired that film, and what made you want to do that film in animation as opposed to other mediums.
So I was inspired by my family's song that you hear like a bit through, like halfway through. That's something that's been passed down from generation to generation as a African American who has ancestors who are descended from enslaved people. So it was inspired mainly from that, and also a short story that I wrote in undergrad. And because it was a funeral and it was such a white space, I was asked, why is this in a fantasy setting? It could just be a funeral. But the inherent fantasy of like the African American, I think, experience of funerals needed to be highlighted in that sense. And also in the generational aspect of the young protagonist, where I see with Gen Z and even millennials, where their voices are stifled to the point where people do not hear them. And that's where the mute protagonist came from, and why she communicates through sign, and how she's the one that brings revelation and saves her people. The people that are the least listened to are the ones that are going to save us.
Yeah, I thought what was really beautiful about the film, I mean, besides the fact that it's just a really beautifully, animated film, was the fact that she had the choice, right, to drink this concoction and forget, right? Forget this being that she loved a lot and was very close to, but she chose not to forget, right? She chose to stand in that and evolve. And I think there's a way in which, that rings really, really true and really loudly for all of us right now, right? Like the importance of not forgetting who we are, of not forgetting all the things that have made us who we are, but also of persevering, right? Of pushing through. Can you talk a little bit about just the technical aspects of the film? What did you animate with? Was it After Effects, or did you use another medium? And then how long? Because of my background, like back in another life, was animation, and it is a tedious medium, right? I'm not sure that people understand how much work goes into making an animated film. Like it is hours and hours and hours and hours and months of work. And can you also, miss a little bit of a two-part question, were you animating primarily by yourself, or did you work with a team?
Yeah, so if anyone's seen Parks and Rec, like Ben makes like this animation, he spends like weeks on it, and then he plays it and it's like less than a second. So this was all done by hand via a program called TV Paint animation. So every second you see is at least 12 drawings. Sometimes those drawings are shot twice. It was my third year film, and at UCLA, we are required to do everything by ourselves. So I did everything by myself. All the drawings or the backgrounds are hand painted. And because I wanted more work for myself, I guess. And yeah, animation has always been a medium that called to me in terms of like fantasy. Like there's so many possibilities with it, and you can do anything. So I think that story that I created suited the medium well. And then the two-parter, what was the other part of the question? Sorry.
Oh, you answered it. Did you
Okay.
Did you work with the team and then the medium that you used to make it?
Yeah, mostly by myself. I did ask friends last minute for the screening at the end of the year if they could color a few characters for me, but all the animation was done by me.
Yeah, it was a beautiful film, and I wanted it to be longer. Like I wanted to see a feature of it. I wanted to play it as a video game, right? Like I wanted to learn more about this character, particularly like now that she's in this new world, right? I wanted to see how she explores this world that she's in, by herself, right? And presumably where all the other dead beings go, right? That are launched into into this universe, right? Which I thought was also really cool. Do you have plans to like expand the project?
People have told me to pitch, but I have feelings about TV animation and how they can sometimes just shelve projects and never release them again. You won't have ownership over them. So maybe at the end, I was thinking of doing a credit scene where the grandma comes after her and scolds her in the way that Black grandmas do. It's like, what were you thinking? What are you doing? Like, obviously, I'm going to come and get you. So there is always a continuation, because I think the ending is meant to be like, this is our rebirth. This is our chance to come back to this planet and treat it the way that it deserves to be treated, the right way. So it's endless in that way.
Excellent. And now I want to move on to EQ. We have Nia in the building. And so Nia, can you tell me a little bit about, we know that the film is directed by Brother Bashi Rose, who again is here virtually in spirit with us. Can you speak a little bit about the concept though? Because it's funny, because I saw when you guys were shooting a little bit of it. And it was like, oh, okay. It was really refreshing to see, the final product and how beautiful it turned out, and that the film truly is a completely community-made film. So can you talk a little bit about the concept, this notion of this woman kind of going through a kind of breakup, and then
Excuse me, sorry. I'm living in the city. So EQ, as you said, directed by Bashi Rose. It was for a song that was written and performed by myself, and it was produced by Maurice Carroll. And so it was written from a perspective of exactly how the film shows of taking grief, because as you said, there's so many different forms of grief of loved ones, whether it's of direct family, our people as a culture, all different types of grief and all the various forms of relationships. But just taking that experience and that energy that can, on one hand, leave us feeling powerless, helpless, of low self-esteem, just transferring that energy into lessons, into cultivating power of yourself. Because as we know, that change that we do experience within ourselves is shown and emanates out into the world to inspire and empower others. So that was the inspiration of just giving a visual depiction of that. So I wanted to show that transformation, to evoke, as far as in my performance of the visual, to just be able to, without words, show that journey and give that sentiment. That was hopefully I answered.
No, definitely, sis. And I think it's such a beautifully, it's such a beautiful film, because it shows there's a kind of choice, right? Like, and I think you're watching the beginning of it, and that it's so easy to fall into a state of grief, right? Or depression, or drink yourself to sleep, or, but she transfers that energy, right? Transcends it really, and tunes into her goddess self, her divine self. And I appreciated those scenes. And I'm not sure if you can answer this, but if you can, I was curious a little bit about some of the aesthetic choices, the blurring and the overlay, to show that transformation. Are you familiar with why, or did you have some hand in some of those decisions? And if not, or if you don't want to speak to that, can you talk a little bit about the costume?
So from my perspective, as far as presenting Bashi with the treatment, I wanted to cultivate personal experiences of initiation and rebirth that I have experienced through my spiritual practice. So part of that was just tapping into that that African culture, us being of the diaspora. So I wanted to just depict and showcase that of our own culture into, someone said drawing into that ancestral and our roots. So I wanted to show that, especially with the cowrie shells and what they depict, specifically with the different deities of the Yoruba culture. Oshun specifically. So that's why, you see the honey in one of the scenes. Just as far as we know, white is being, shows purification, really shows it's ceremonial of, in a sense, a marrying or coming into yourself. So those were some of the choices. As far as Bashi is concerned, just the aesthetics of the visuals. He came from a perspective of the Black arts movement and ritual theater that Barbara Antier and Ed Bullins and different ones inspired and showcased throughout their careers. So that was some of the visuals choices that were made for him tying in my ideas for treatment as far as those different rituals and him coming from a cinematic point of view.
So now I want to switch to our last two films. And I put this in a category called Sam Greenlee Told Us, because I think both of these kind of speak to that, that spook who sat by the door kind of aesthetic of, how do you bring change, right, in a real way. And I thought that both of these films, The Lobbyist and B.G.K., both were very clever in the ways that they thought about how, basically how to dismantle white supremacy, right? And how to do that in a kind of inside way. So starting with The Lobbyist, Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired that perspective in the importance of kind of time travel as a means through which to dismantle, white supremacy, or basically to hold politicians to take care of their citizenry, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thomas Pace, the writer and director of The Lobbyists, definitely had this vision of, making a statement of the lack of principle in government. Stylistically, very much of a Twilight Zone type feel, a neo-noir type feel. And basically, the character, so Ms. Benjamin and Dr. White, they're more something of a submersion of money and race, and kind of taking this time travel. So
yeah, I loved it as a concept, right? If you had the power to sort of travel back in time, into the future, how do you leverage that power for actual transformation, right? For actual change. And I thought that it was interesting that they weren't asking like a big ask, right? Like it was like one bill that was on the table that they're trying to get passed. And that's, that was just kind of really radical and revolutionary for me, right? Like, how do you use this power, the power of kind of one bill, right? But also in this moment, the power of one vote, right? Like thinking about your power as an individual to create real lasting change, right? I really appreciated that. Can you talk a little bit about process as far as how it was for you to play this primary protagonist? Like, were you excited about that role? Have you played sci-fi films before?
First sci-fi film, very excited about it. I think that the collaboration, the team that we had was awesome. So I was excited about working with Thomas. I was excited about the film from the beginning. I loved reading for it. And then I enjoyed bringing it to life. I love that. I love Ms. Benjamin's powerful regard for her. She's just this fierce DC lobbyist. So, get to step outside of myself for a little bit and transform that. So I did. I enjoyed the whole thing. And I think for me, probably the best part about it was the ending. Again, just a very, very powerful female. So I very much enjoyed it.
Excellent. And just curious, and I wanted more from this as well, because there's so many directions it could go in. It could be a feature, right? It could be a series. Are there any plans to kind of expand this project in the future? I'm not sure if you can speak to that.
I can't speak to that, but this is definitely a recurring statement that we all wanted it to be longer. So Thomas is a smart guy. I think he could, you know, with the pandemic especially, maybe he's played around with turning it into a feature or making it a little bit longer. We kind of fell in love with the character, so it would be nice to see more of them.
Excellent. And now moving over to our B.G.K. crew. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little, when I first saw the film, I was like, hold on, so are we trying to say that liberation has to be the embodiment of becoming white men? Like, is that what we're trying to say? Like, there was a moment when I was a little irritated by it, but then I was excited to be in conversation with you, because I'm sure that there's more nuance to the concept of the film. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired that story ultimately to African American women or Black identifying women who decide to, you know, snatch the body snatch wealthy white men?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I mean, even in writing it, there were times where I was like, am I gonna write this? Are they gonna do this? But I think that, like, for me, it was sort of having this idea that these women are so desperate for change. They're so desperate, and they're sort of been driven mad in their own minds that they believe that this is the way. And they happen to have the resources, the magic to actually carry this out, so it does get done. I think for me, I really wanted to point out that sometimes it can be sort of maddening to be a woman, be a Black woman, and to sort of like have society constantly put these ideas on you and in your mind, that you start to have maybe some ideas and behaviors that aren't really your personality. They're part of what society has put on you, what you think about yourself, and maybe you doubt yourself. Or for me, it was, I'm a videographer, photographer, you know, just I want to direct full time and do films, but you know, to make that money, I do post-production and video work. So being in that space that's predominantly with men, predominantly white men, you know, I had one of those days where I'm on set or doing a job with someone that says something or asks me something that is just irrelevant to what we're doing, that immediately bumps back to being female, being Black. And for me, I sort of had one of those moments where I was like, you know, people, I feel like, sometimes get in a place where you feel like you're back against the corner, where you kind of feel like, you know, I just want to get out of this. I want to be someone else. And I think with this film, we really got to sort of like play with that and see where that leads. And I think the idea of like taking a walk in someone's shoes, we always say that, but to really do that and see that on screen and see it in this way, I think is just really interesting to me.
When Blayre told me the film, I was immediately, I was like,
can you talk a little bit about?
I was just saying, I'm the cinematographer and producer, and when Blayre told me about the film, I was in shock, because I think she really wrote and said what a lot of Black people, you know, think about. You know, you might not want to live in somebody else's shoes, but you do think about it. And if your back is against the corner, and we see how like society is today, when, you know, who gets the most opportunities and stuff like that, it's not a lot of Black people. So like a lot of people will do anything to just survive in this society today. So I think she did that in a horror way, and you know, I was excited to shoot it and edit it. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And can you talk a little bit about sort of what made you use kind of the supernatural in that regard, like the importance of, and also like it was during Halloween, right? So there's a kind of spooky factor to it that I was really intrigued by. Like they doing some work on these cats, right? Can you talk about why it was important for them to kind of body snatch in that way, like in that kind of supernatural way, as opposed to kind of the narratives that we've seen before of kind of by happenstance, you are switched into the body of someone else, right? But this was a very intentional act of we gonna do this work and then we gonna be in dude's body, which was really interesting.
Right. I think for me, it's just, I'm just a longtime horror fan. I think for me, the things I love the most is the magical supernatural. Like even when I saw the list of films for this block, I was like, man, this is awesome. Like this is the whole mindset that I would be in. So I think for me, I think it really was just the classic, like it's Halloween night, the full moon's up and it's time to get down. But I think it's also just like having the character Erica, who's like the angel of death with those wings, and then having her partner who is like almost mayhem, the mayhem of it, the skeleton. I think for me, it just sort of showed that like these women were, this is like their last night. That film is their last night alive as them. It's like sort of like a death that they're having. And I think to sort of bring it full circle with that, we're to come on Halloween. And it also for me helped to sort of like throw it off a little bit, to kind of not really put you on the breadcrumbs that something really sinister is about to go down. It's like a Halloween party. We're trying to have fun and sort of like chill. It was always sort of these elements I tried to put in there to sort of kind of give you a little bit of crumbs that something weird's about to happen, but to also just put you off the trail.
Excellent. And Torres, did you want to speak to that as well? I didn't want to cut you off.
I think she said it all. But I could say it was fun shooting this project, renting out the space and decorating it. And, you know, I love Halloween, and just decorating in that space was amazing. We shot some amazing stuff there. So yeah, it was great. It was a fun experience.
Excellent. So now I want to kind of open this up to everybody. This is kind of popcorn style. And I think maybe if you can sort of speak or put your finger up, and then Rashawn can uncue you or choose a person to speak to it. But I'm curious about kind of fundraising, right? Like how each of you found the means or the time or the money in particular to create your projects. And everyone doesn't have to speak to this, but for those of you that can, that would be great. Because I think that right now we're in a moment where there's more of an appreciation for seeing Black protagonists in roles that are non-comedic, right? Which if we think about the kind of history of film and the history, particularly in America, the primary roles that Black actors have had have not been roles that have challenged them, right, as actors, or challenged our collective imaginaries about Black lives, right? They've largely been films that have not pushed us to the boundary of the possibilities of our experiences, right? Where Halle Berry for years had to play prostitutes, and, you know, other actors for years had to play criminals or had to be comedic relief. But now we're seeing broader appreciation for sci-fi and for romantic genres, and for, again, genres that in the past it was very difficult for Black actors and for Black directors to get funding to create those sorts of cinematic experiences that centered profound reflections of Black experience and of Black lives. So anyone who is interested in speaking to that, how did you fund your project essentially? And how did you get buy-in if you had external producers to support projects that are kind of non-traditional?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So for our project, we started out just self-funding, just our own monies, you know, out of pocket, waiting for the check to come, you know. And then we got to about 2 weeks outside of production or so, and was like, we're gonna have to cancel the whole situation because we ran out of funds. Then we went to Indiegogo. And this was actually our second time crowdfunding a project. First time we did it, it just did not go the way we wanted to. So we had some learning, some new information that we had. So with this one, it was successful. We were able to raise about $1,500 more that we needed to finish the project. And that was experience. I think for us, we're still constantly learning the whole crowdfunding game. Yeah. It's still something that I feel like we're both still trying to like really wrap our heads around, like how to do it well, how it works well. So that's something that we're always trying to get feedback on. And if anyone here has successfully crowdfunded a campaign, please reach out to us because we're always trying to get more information.
Yep, go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, so Lobbyists, that Thomas paid out of pocket for all of this stuff, and was extremely impressive because we filmed this in the dead of winter, Chicago winter, in January, minus 20 degrees. And everything that he found, from a desk to a chair to a flag, was brought in negative 20 degree weather by him and 3 other people. So he was able to go to some thrift stores and go on eBay and get stuff. And, you know, you ask a friend of a friend or post something on Facebook, hey, do you have a desk we can use? And that's how Lobbyists kind of came to life. So very resourceful.
Excellent. And Stephanie, did you want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, I'll go after Amia. So.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Oh no, it's no problem. So EQ, my project was completely a love donation based, as well as just, you know, my personal funds, which made it even more powerful because it was definitely everyone was committed to the vision and was committed to that purpose of getting it out to the masses. So, and that was the greatest blessing.
Excellent. And Stephanie?
So for the Black baptism, I mean, I was just going to, it was kind of a do it however you can get it done. That's how I started. I didn't have a budget at first. That's not a good idea to have a budget. But I knew that I'd maybe like 5,000 max was like my top. And the total budget ended up being about 10,000. Early on, I'm a part of a really awesome group that we started a little over, maybe almost 2 years ago, called the Hayti Black Filmmakers Collective group here in Durham. And it's based out of the Hayti Heritage Center, historically Black Wall Street, and they have a Hayti Heritage Film Festival. And local director, producer, Christopher Everett, who's the director of Wilmington on Fire, about the 1898 massacre. He's part of the group, and he agreed to help finance some of it. So we went ahead and shot it. And then when I got into post and realized I was going to need some more money and to pay some of the deferrals, we did a Seed and Spark fundraiser and raised $5,000. That way, that was a lot of work. I had to be dedicated to it for about a month, but it's the quickest way that you can make your money doing crowdfunding for sure. And Chris had a background and expertise with that. And then I started to apply for grants here locally, and I got a few grants so far.
Excellent. Were there any other directors who wanted to speak to that question? I don't want to. Awesome. Okay. Cool beans. All right. So we had a few audience questions come in, and we want to encourage audience members who are watching. If you have a question, you know, feel free to put it in the chat, however you're watching via YouTube or Facebook, and our awesome team, Rasan, will pick that up and send it to us so that we can make sure your question is posed. So this first question is from Nola Honey, and she says, or they say, thinking of applying Black magic and spirituality as drawing on ancestral survival technologies, have any of you experienced a shift in capacity through the process of creating your works? So really powerful question, right? So in thinking about the kind of media that you're making, has that influenced, you know, not just your protagonist, right, in a fictional way, but has that influenced you as creatives? Good question, Nola. And this is anyone who wants to take that. We can do the popcorn style again.
Yeah, just while creating it, like the last few nights that I had of trying to rush towards this deadline, I was just listening to like Kirk Franklin, like all of this gospel music, just to get through. Like there was 3 days in a row where I had pulled all-nighters just to get the film done. And since then, trying to attribute music and spirituality into my ancestral veneration has been definitely a thing that I've been doing. So I definitely noticed a shift after I finished the film.
Beautiful. I spoke from Omni as well.
Yes. I myself, for the visual for EQ, grew my hair out. And during that particular time, I experienced so many different things throughout life, just through the ebb and flows, the highs and lows, including my grandmother transitioning. So it was just like so much energy and so many different things that were released in the actual scene of me shaving my head, which was also a part of, like I said, mentioned earlier, a spiritual journey and initiation into my particular spiritual practice, you know. So that tied into how Nola mentioned that Black magic and ancestral, you know, practices that I incorporated into my life. And for, you know, any woman, you know, or any person who has liberated themselves and like doing the big chop, we know that that in itself is almost an unexplainable like feeling of liberation and a rebirth. So yeah, definitely there was a shift in creating the visual for EQ for me.
Beautiful. Does anyone else want to speak to that question? Did you experience any personal shifts in the process of doing your, you know, your supernatural films? Okay. So do we have any other questions for San, or do we want to? Okay. Oh yes, B.G.K. Kuru. Yep.
Just relief, you know, like a lot of film allows us to like, you know, release what we're thinking in our mind. So when you're actually writing your film, that the process of making it and putting it out there for the world to see makes you, it kind of shifts you saying, you know, like I can do this, you know, we can do this, you know, films are hard to make. And when they're finally made and the reward you get from when people see it, it's very rewarding. And it inspires you to want to create more.
I just
Excellent.
have to piggyback on top of that.
Yep, I see your hand, Jackie.
I just want to piggyback on top of what Tora shared. That's so true. I mean, this is liberating, you know, being on a panel with all of you creatives, celebrating the beauty and power and culture of Black art and Black history and Black women. It's amazing. It's all liberating. So this panel is liberating.
Yeah, I mean, quickly, just to amplify that, B.G.K.
Facts. Yeah,
Lobbyists.
definitely very
This is, I mean, I'm not sure what the question, the context of did we increase our capacity, but like filmmaking is a lot of work. This drained my capacity. I mean, like I'm still recovering. It's been over a year just in terms of the time and energy you have to do to give birth to it. It's like a baby. But in context to just mindsets, I mean, of course, this was something inside of me and there was part of it that was cathartic as well. But I definitely have shifted a lot towards more of an empowerment mindset, like not playing the victim, which was a strong narrative in the film. And a big part of that, and like I see it still now, even going on in the media, with the social economic climate, the race climate, and personal relationships. It's like we're giving people too much of our energy. And so that is like where my mind has shifted to, like really trying to be aware and intentional about like who I give my time and energy to, who I let trigger my emotions and things like that, because that is the power that you're giving away. And also establishing my own value system. So I don't care what someone has the nerve to try to label me or say what I qualify for. I say what I deserve, and if you have to challenge it, if you want to challenge it, may the best will win.
Excellent. So in our last few minutes on the discussion, and this is for everyone, can you think of some advice that you can give to other emerging creatives, other emerging filmmakers who are interested in doing, a film project that maybe is less traditional? What advice would you give to them to just encourage them to push forward with their vision and with their dreams?
Okay, I'll start.
I saw
my
B.G.K.
advice is
crew.
Oh,
Go ahead.
You can go ahead.
my advice, okay, is to complete your story. There are going to be times when you're just going to want to quit or take a break, and it could be an eternal, I should say. Keep it going. Like, someone wants to see your story, someone needs to hear it. So keep pushing forward and persevering, just like how our films are telling our characters to do.
I would say just do it. Piggybacking off of what she just said, I would say just do it. There's nothing to it but to do it, and once you complete it, it's very rewarding. Me and Blayre, we started this filmmaking journey 3 years ago, and we had an amazing experience. We shot so many films and traveled the country and showcased them at different festivals, and just showing these films to people who wouldn't even know your story or know what who you are. It's a way to connect, So tell your story and don't let anybody stop you from doing it. We all have stories, and they need to be told, especially Black stories. So.
Yeah, just to add, especially in this time right now, like just keep your hope up, keep your mindset right, because like especially for artists and creatives, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like just keep your eye on your art, put it all on your art, and don't give up, and just stay focused.
Yeah, and I would just add to just stay present and mindful and open to how your story, how things can evolve and flow outside of your initial vision that you may have had for something, because sometimes, as I said, the divine time will bring something that just amplifies it or takes it to another level. So just in addition to sticking to the vision, be open to it evolving to other things as well.
I guess for all the Black animators, especially the Black women and femme animators out there, to start small and just do whatever you can to get your vision like drawn, created on screen, because your voices are so important. We are out here. There's like a lot more Black animators than people think. So you're not alone. So you have community, and build your stories, and good things will come to you.
Awesome. So really quickly, in our last few seconds, can folks just, this is your chance to plug. So how can people stay in touch with you, learn more about your film? If you have a website, social media that you can tell folks about, now is the time. We'll start with you, Jackie.
Thank you. So Lobbyists has an Instagram handle. It's the Lobbyists short film. You can also follow me. I post a lot of stuff, and I will also be reposting some of our panels today for the Black Supremacy Film Festival. I will definitely be sharing stuff. So I'm Jackie, JACKI _HYDOCK. And Thomas, we also have the Facebook, the Lobbyists Facebook page, and on Twitter.
All the social media handles are on the website, theblackbaptism.com, theblackbaptism.com. And you can follow the production company, which will be more long-term with future projects and other things we have going on related to the same type of material, at mein5d.com on Instagram and Twitter. That's MEIN5D.com on IG and Twitter. And then the Black Baptism on Instagram and Facebook.
My website. Oh, go ahead.
You can follow me on Instagram at Omnia Azar, OMNIAAZAR. From there, you can connect to the director, Bashi Rose, at Bashi Rose, BASHIROSE, as well as the producer of the song, Maurice Carroll, all on Instagram through my Linktree link on Instagram.
So I mostly operate through my website, and it's just my name. So JacquelineCJBarnes.com. There's contact information if you want to freelance, get animation work done, stuff like that. You can email me through there. And I also have an Instagram under Phantom Noir, PHANTANOIR. So yeah, thank you.
Yep, Wasi Films, WAASI Films.com, Wasi Films, Instagram.
Yep.
My Instagram is Mamabolo, which is my last name here, MAMABOLO.
My Instagram is henrietta.creative, and you can find me on my website at www.henriettabiayemi.com.
So has everyone presented? Sorry, there's a bit of a delay on my end. Thumbs up if yes. Awesome. Okay, so it has been a supreme pleasure. I am truly inspired by all of the films that you're creating, and am very excited about everything that you will continue to make. As creatives, we need all of you. So thank you for doing the work. I am Angela in Carroll. You can follow me on IG at Angela_in_Carroll or at AngelaInCarroll.com. Black Femme Supremacy Film Festival is not over yet, family. It will be available until Monday, September 7th. So there's one more day for you to watch a beautiful collection of powerful films. Follow at BFS Film Fest on IG and Twitter, and be sure to vote for the Audience Choice Award on bfsfilmfest.com. Thank you all again. Be safe here.